Love cool terrain but don't have much space to store it? Check this out. So, I have a bag of 4-inch MDF coasters, which are ideal for making terrain with a small footprint. Each of us shall be producing our own scenic coaster for this video, and I have chosen to make an old statue to match the ruined Shrine World forest terrain that I have been building on the channel. I started the build by cutting a polystyrene circle to give me a good ground form to work with. I then cut some foam bricks to form a plinth. These bricks match those on other parts of my scenery, so it helps tie it in visually. For the statue, I went on to Cults 3D and got myself this contemplative angel figure. It might be a copy of a famous statue that I'm not familiar with. If it is, let me know. If you don't have a 3D printer, check out pound shops or charity shops for cheap old toys or ornaments, or at this time of year, festive decorations. It is a quite straightforward build, as the statue has its own base, which tops off the bricks nicely. Here you see I am test fitting as I go to decide what height the statue looks best sitting at. Once it is decided, I use hot glue, like I did with the bricks, to stick it down. I unravelled some regular household string to make vines, and I stiffened them with a bead of super glue. This helps to add scale to the model, as things aren't waving and waggling in the wind. I then shaved down the polystyrene to give it a more natural form. In keeping with the theme of the ruined shrine world, I go over the scenery base with modelling compound from Geek Gaming Scenics, obviously, piling it up at the sides of the plinth. I sprinkle some of my herb flock in a pile around the plinth and then in patches on the rest of the base. This is all sealed down with a mix of PVA glue, water and a dash of dish soap, liberally deposited all over with a pipette. As I leave that all to dry, let's see what the others are up to.
The grim darkness of the far future seems to either be depicted as alien and fantastical, or a proxy for the two world wars. I wanted to combine these styles to draw attention to this weird vibe. I refused to build a whole table for this concept, so the beer coaster is a fine medium to juxtapose these aesthetics. The build. I wanted one side of this to be a slope that had been cut into it to build this trench, which then had something of an elevated platform. I used scrap foam board to build the edges of this little platform. I then made the hill in a rather improvised manner of hot gluing chunks of cardboard in place around those foam board base stuff. I used hot glue and PVA glue for all of this. No super glue, no epoxy, no conventional paper mache either. I set the back wall in place using hot glue at the base and then attached these boards across the back with more hot glue. Just like the gable I might have been fired for building in real life, here I clipped the stirrers to size after attaching them to make everything simpler to assemble. I then applied several layers of glue and paper, a crude approximation of paper mache. I repeated this process of attaching the sticks and chopping them up to make the floorboards. I did just layer and layer that paper on top before using an old food container as a tray to contain the dirt and applying sand as one would basing anything else. Finally, I added the skulls and other gubbins, first with a dot of pure PVA and then following the Frizzoni method of scenic glue and wet water to make indestructible gaming bases.
Hi, in this segment I'm going to make a forest pool, so stay tuned. I did this project as a quick experiment. The whole thing took 2 or 3 hours tops. I've been using some resin water effects for a few projects lately, and I thought I could just make a quick little pool. However, it turns out this project was like the final straw for me, and I started having some really serious health problems. For that reason, I'm putting out this video as a warning to be careful of how you handle epoxy resin, and a few tips on how not to be stupid like me. But first, let's check out how I made it. I picked this stick that looked like a cool tree. I'm going to mix up some milliput and make a rough circular mound to be the basis of our pool and position that twig in there. I start adding some rocks to texture the pool and surroundings. I decide halfway through that it looks cool having these jutting out rocks like teeth, so I press them all around the indentation. An application of glue and some Geek Gaming Scenics will finish texturing the piece. I start building up some vegetation with some flock bushes, running it up the tree trunk in places I feel there may be growth. For twigs, I use some bits of seafoam. Painting this is really going to be super quick.
Howdy, Twiglets! Breeding Tree Gaming is a Nottingham-based collaboration covering various aspects of the wargaming hobby. And if you like what you see, please consider liking, subscribing and sharing our content. It would really help the channel to grow and produce even more content. Now, back to the video. As your wretch was kind enough to give the piece a zenithal prime for me, what would I do without her? I then grabbed 3 paints, Army Painter's Lava Orange, Green Skin and Hydra Turquoise, and dabbed each in turn over the vegetation. With a wet brush, I then did some wet blending in a crude manner on the piece itself before mixing the 3 paints on the palette with water to create a simple wash for the rest of the piece, save the statue itself. Once that was dry, I diluted scale 75 Inktense Chestnut with water to glaze it over the areas of bare soil. Then the statue itself got a liberal coating of Citadel's Nylac Oxide. This paint is meant to weather bronze or copper, but as this is an ancient statue, like say the Statue of Liberty is, I think it served a full cover and I didn't need to do a metallic coat underneath. Once dry, I used Dawnstone dry paint from Citadel to give a heavy dry brush over the stone, and Citadel's Nurgling Green over the vegetation to tie it all together. Then I hot glued several lichen bushes around the plinth, as I did on the previous terrain, and I ran some diluted Inktense Chestnut over the vines before coming in again with Nylac Oxide to clean up the statue. Let's go see how the others are doing.
Like a good little Kiwi, I primed the model with a Halford's Matte Black Automotive Primer Spray rattle can. I needed the economical volume of paint that only a rattle can provide. For the actual colored paint, I used various wall paints in their little tester pots. While these paints are freakishly matte and have a great working time, the color selection is limited, they don't have very good coverage when thinned, and they tend to chip off fairly easy, especially during a wash and wipe approach. With the base coats done, I used that good old wash and wipe approach with some wood stain to make the ground more interesting. The teeny tiny details weren't a major deviation. I brushed on black primer and painted them as normal for a high-impact polystyrene. I did make the mistake of skipping the underbrushing until the very last one of these. If you're ever painting over black, do some sort of pre-highlighting or underpainting. Anyway, I used some contrast paint for a wash with a bit of wiping, which was different, but otherwise, it's done.
I give it a zenithal prime with first black and then white, and then I airbrush in some Basilicanum grey with a drop of Payne's Grey acrylic ink. This adds a nice blue-grey colour to work from. Next, to add some colour to the wood. For this I use Inktense wood from scale 75. I also used this randomly across the base for some earthy tones. Next, some Tesseract Glow sprayed onto the leaves and shrubbery to add a quick rich green hit. After all this airbrushing has dried, I used some Mojave White and a large soft brush to dry brush the piece. To finish up the painting, I'm going to apply a brown oil wash all over and let it dry for a couple of days. Well, here's where it all went wrong. If not for the project, then definitely for my health. I mixed up some epoxy resin water effect like I've done so many times before at my desk in my house without proper protective gear. This is what I didn't know about working with epoxy. Even though it's often sold to hobbyists without proper warning of the health dangers, it can have extreme and long-lasting effects on your health, and you won't realise right away. A sensitivity to epoxy develops over time, so while you may not notice anything for a few months or even years of the occasional project, there's a huge risk of developing severe health problems. Never use this stuff inside your house like I did, and always use respirators, gloves and goggles. Regular extractor fans and windows open are not protection enough. Well, that's the piece done, and though it caused me a lot of literal headaches, I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out. Stay safe and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. See ya!